We idolize the golden age. We envision the romance, the glamour, the iconic heroes who defined masculinity for a generation. But behind those million-dollar smiles and dazzling spotlights lay a hidden world of untold cruelty, predation, and self-destruction. What if the heartthrobs you thought were dream men were actually monsters? Hollywood didn't just sell us stories. They engineered a great deception, meticulously hiding shocking crimes and profound moral failures with silk gloves and iron contracts. Today, we're tearing down the illusion. These are 19 classic Hollywood heartthrobs whose private lives were a catastrophic failure, hidden for decades by the ruthless studio machine. Get ready to look at your favorite film legends and ask, what were they hiding? Fatty Arbuckle. While Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was ultimately acquitted in the highly publicized 1921 case involving assault and murder allegations, the scandal itself serves as the perfect starting point for understanding the exploitation machine. Arbuckle was one of the biggest stars of the silent era, but his trial signaled the end of Hollywood's innocence. The massive public backlash against Arbuckle demonstrated to the studios that public perception was paramount, regardless of legal facts. This realization is why Universal immediately implemented the morality clause, fundamentally changing actor contracts. Arbuckle's career was destroyed by the allegations, even after acquittal, demonstrating the destructive power of a scandal on the star's viability. But the enduring legacy is the establishment of the tool that protected every subsequent heartthrob on this list from a similar fate. The system wasn't instituted to protect the stars. It was instituted to contain the damage they might cause to the industry's bottom line. The tragedy of Arbuckle was that the system hadn't perfected its cover-up tactics yet. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn, the definitive swashbuckling hero, was revered for his adventurous spirit and dashing persona, setting the gold standard for the romantic leading man of the 1930s and 40s. Yet his life was a torrent of hedonism and sexual conquest that reached a criminal climax in 1942-43. Flynn faced a highly sensationalized trial on multiple counts of statutory rape involving two aspiring teenage actresses, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterley. Though the trial concluded in an acquittal, largely due to a defense strategy that ruthlessly discredited the accusers, the underlying details exposed a celebrity culture that systematically targeted vulnerable young women. The acquittal, achieved after 24 hours of jury deliberation, did not absolve him in the court of history. Moreover, historical documentation of Flynn's life, specifically his earlier years in Papua and New Guinea, reveals a history where his celebration of sex with very young New Guinea girls was known, connecting his behavior in Hollywood to a long-standing global pattern of exploitation and abuse of power that the film industry conveniently ignored or condoned. The most damning consequence of this trial was the perverse public glorification that followed. The intense media focus around the case and his eventual freedom led to the popularization of the phrase, "in like Flynn," a cultural shorthand for effortless and assured sexual success. In essence, celebrity culture actively absorbed and celebrated his alleged predatory behavior, using the successful neutralization of a criminal charge as a testament to his untouchable status. His monstrousness was rebranded as charm, a shocking failure of public morality enforced by a powerful defense and the industry's need for an icon. Randolph Scott. The studio's desire for a clean, straight image for their heartthrobs led to some of the most profound acts of institutionalized emotional cruelty, the Lavender marriage. While the term describes numerous studio pairings, the dynamic of a star using a heterosexual marriage as a shield demonstrates a systemic abuse of power over women, turning them into unwitting participants in a lifelong public deception. In the context of the Golden Age, many male stars, particularly those rumored or known to be gay, like Randolph Scott, were forced to enter into sham marriages to preserve their lucrative leading man status. The studio fixers, focused solely on contract compliance, dictated whom they married and dated. The monstrosity here is the man who prioritized his career over the emotional well-being of his female partner, leveraging social norms to trap a woman in a deceptive, potentially loveless arrangement that ensured her lifelong complicity in his masquerade. The star's choice to comply fully with the arrangement shows a willingness to inflict sustained emotional cruelty on a spouse for financial and professional gain. Robert Mitchum. Hollywood was a 24/7 dream machine, constantly demanding performance. This relentless schedule was physically unsustainable, leading studios to turn their heartthrobs into chemically dependent workhorses. The fixers, whose job was to ensure stars were never sidelined, explicitly prescribed uppers to keep actors working long hours, transforming difficult men into outright monsters of mood swings and volatile behavior. Robert Mitchum, famed for his brooding anti-hero persona, embodied the dangerous blend of studio pressure and personal rebellion that led to chronic substance dependence. His 1948 arrest on marijuana charges, a major scandal at the time, highlighted how widely substance abuse permeated the lives of stars and how often these dependencies originated with the studio itself. This chemical reliance created a volatile, unpredictable professional and domestic life. The actor's self-destruction, facilitated by the studio's demand for constant output, became a form of psychological cruelty, turning personal dependency into a source of fear and instability for those around him. Laurence Olivier. Laurence Olivier's name remains synonymous with great actor. However, his personal life, marked by intense emotional complexity, shows how deeply a star's ego and single-minded focus could damage those closest to him. Olivier was famed for a tumultuous private existence that often brought great emotional stress to his partners and family. This strain was exacerbated by his blunt prioritization of financial gain over artistic integrity late in his career. He openly admitted, "People ask me why I'm playing in this picture. The answer is simple. Money, dear boy. Nothing is beneath me if it pays well." This cold, calculated approach to his work mirrored a personal distance that became emotionally devastating to his wives, particularly Vivien Leigh, who struggled significantly with mental health challenges. This form of monstrousness is not physical, but rather the silent manipulation and sustained emotional distance that leaves a partner isolated and suffering, a pattern similar to the emotional abuse Gary Cooper inflicted on his own family. The star's professional ego translated into domestic self-interest, leaving emotional wreckage in its wake. Clark Gable. Clark Gable, the undisputed king of Hollywood, symbolized rugged, uncomplicated American masculinity. He was the icon of reliability. The reality, however, involved a history of alleged violence and a profound act of complicity and institutional cruelty. Accounts from those familiar with his private life suggest Gable possessed a violent, volatile temper. However, the most concrete evidence of his cruelty is found in his corporate conduct. Gable had a torrid public affair with Joan Crawford. When Crawford became pregnant, believing Gable to be the father, the consequences were handled swiftly and brutally by the studio machine. MGM head Irving Thalberg demanded the liaison end, and Gable complied instantly, stating, "He would have ended my career in 15 minutes. I had no interest in becoming a waiter." By prioritizing his career over any sense of personal responsibility, Gable actively consented to and benefited from the forced abortion arranged by fixer Howard Strickling. This behavior demonstrates a calculus of cruelty, a man who leveraged the ruthless efficiency of the studio system to dispose of human consequences, including a potential child, ensuring his image remained untainted and his paycheck guaranteed. His monstrous side was not just his alleged temper, but his corporate self-preservation at any human cost. Sean Connery. Sean Connery, the original and perhaps most celebrated James Bond, embodied post-war suave, power, and effortless charisma. Yet this image of masculinity was undercut by his repeated explicit endorsement of violence against women, making his monstrousness one of the most public and unrepentant. In a now infamous 1965 Playboy interview, Connery stated that it was acceptable to strike a woman with an open hand, claiming that women needed a sharp reminder. Decades later, Connery doubled down on these views in 1992, stating in a Vanity Fair interview that women were sometimes seeking the ultimate confrontation. They want a smack. This confirmation of a fundamental, uncorrected misogyny shocked the global public and led to formal political condemnation. Members of the UK Parliament tabled an early-day motion expressing profound disgust at his repetition of offensive views on violence against women. His statements were widely criticized as an attempt to normalize abuse by projecting responsibility onto the victim. Connery's status as a global icon gave his harmful doctrine immense reach, showing how celebrity power could be leveraged to defend reprehensible acts. Unlike stars whose secrets were meticulously hidden, Connery's monstrous views were public, articulate, and sustained, cementing him as an icon who publicly normalized violence in a way few others dared. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart was the cinematic archetype of the cynical, world-weary anti-hero. Tough, controlled, and eternally cool on screen. Off-screen, he was the center of chaos. His marriage to actress Mayo Method was so famously turbulent, it was dubbed the Battling Bogarts. While Bogart was documented as a victim of violence, Method once stabbed him in the shoulder and threatened him with a pistol at a party. He was also an active, relentless instigator of conflict. He had a reputation for being the kind of guest who was certain to incite a minimum of 2 fistfights and 8 yelling arguments and exit laughing. His destructive behavior was fueled by alcohol, a dependency that became a professional hazard. During the famously difficult on-location shoot of The African Queen in the Belgian Congo, co-star Katharine Hepburn documented Bogart and director John Huston's decision to consume only liquor, baked beans, and canned asparagus instead of local water to avoid dysentery. Bogart's tough guy lifestyle necessitated chemically aided survival, demonstrating a professional and personal reliance on alcohol that was destructive to his health and created an extremely challenging, volatile environment for his colleagues. His embrace of conflict defined his career and his destructive personal life. Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power was one of 20th Century Fox's biggest assets in the 1930s and 40s. Known for his astonishing good looks and dramatic flair, he was the perfect romantic lead, yet his immense popularity masked a deep personal unhappiness rooted in systemic studio control. The studios dictated everything from how much their actors weighed to whom they dated, effectively turning them into indentured servants. Power, like many stars, chafed under this total control, often leading a double life. The failure to live authentically, due to the professional requirement to uphold a perfect manufactured image, resulted in a profound emotional deficit and neglect of his true self. This emotional prison, enforced by the lucrative contracts, created a star who is profoundly unreliable and neglectful in his personal relationships, prioritizing the manufactured persona over genuine connection. This negligence, a quiet form of cruelty, damaged his marriages and familial relationships. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis was the ultimate charismatic, youthful leading man of the 1950s and 60s, famed for roles like those in Some Like It Hot. However, his glittering image concealed a life dominated by severe substance use disorder. Curtis struggled profoundly with addiction, abusing alcohol, cocaine, and heroin, which eventually contributed to serious health issues, including liver disease and a heart attack. The most tragic consequence of his monstrous behavior was the generational damage he inflicted. His daughter, actress Jamie Lee Curtis, openly discussed how her own recovery journey was dedicated to breaking the cycle that has basically destroyed the lives of generations in my family. The highly addictive environment he fostered in his home contributed directly to the substance abuse habits of his children, including the tragic overdose death of his son at age 21. His failure as a parent, rooted in chemical dependency, illustrates that the Golden Age's hedonism was far from victimless. It left deep scars of intergenerational trauma. The monstrousness was the quiet, slow poison of neglect and addiction that fundamentally ruined his family unit. George Raft. George Raft, known for his roles as slick, streetwise gangsters, brought an authentic menace to the screen, often blurring the line between his character and his real-life associations. Raft was famously and proudly connected to notorious figures in the American underworld. The system of celebrity power and charisma could sometimes serve as a valuable asset for organized crime, offering a veneer of legitimacy and access, an association Raft embraced. His willingness to maintain these deeply problematic ties demonstrates a profound narcissistic disregard for public safety and lawful conduct, fueled by a celebrity entitlement that transcended legal boundaries. This alignment with criminal entities made him a dangerous conduit between Hollywood and the underworld, creating an environment of instability and risk for anyone associated with him. This reckless, often high-speed lifestyle was common among certain heartthrobs, symbolizing an inner turmoil and disregard for conventional rules. James Dean. James Dean remains the quintessential sensitive, alienated teenage rebel, forever immortalized by his speed and his untimely death in a high-speed car crash in 1955. He was the face of cool, reckless vulnerability. The self-destructive recklessness that culminated in his fatal accident was far from simple teenage angst. Dean confided in Elizabeth Taylor, revealing a hidden, profoundly damaging secret. His childhood minister, Reverend James DeWeird, had sexually abused him. Taylor perceived that the trauma had hurt him deeply and profoundly. This information fundamentally recontextualizes his adult life. His public displays of raw, genuine emotions such as the ugly mess of despair and hopelessness, seen in his on-screen crying, and his relentless pursuit of speed and danger shift from nihilism to visible manifestations of deep, unresolved trauma. The car crash that killed him becomes a symbolic outcome of an internal wound he could never outrun. His monstrous actions were self-destructive, often endangering others, like his passenger, but they were an outcome of being failed by the institutions meant to protect him, the church, and then amplified by a celebrity culture that celebrated his volatility without seeking to heal the underlying damage. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin, a foundational figure in cinema and an enduring international icon, was often celebrated for his on-screen humanity and charm. Off-screen, however, he exhibited a tyrannical pattern of behavior, particularly concerning his relationships and marriages to extremely young women. Chaplin had multiple notorious relationships with women who were minors or barely adults, most notably marrying 16-year-old Una O'Neill. This pattern of pursuing and marrying partners significantly younger than himself, often while they were still in their teens, highlights an immense imbalance of power and control. Chaplin was also known for the kind of professional ego and tyranny that led to notorious difficulties on set, exerting his status to intimidate or undermine those who challenged his vision. When the star's power is nearly absolute, as Chaplin's was, the ability to exploit those beneath him, whether professionally or intimately, becomes an unchecked license for cruelty, regardless of the law. Wallace Reid. Wallace Reid was the quintessential handsome matinee idol of the late 1910s and early 1920s. His tragic downfall serves as a devastating early example of how studio demands actively created monsters through chemical dependency, pushing them past their physical and mental limits. The Golden Age film industry, churning out hundreds of movies yearly, often relied on uppers and morphine to maintain the production pace. Reid was severely injured on a film set in 1919 and was subsequently prescribed morphine to manage the pain, reportedly at the urging of studio producers who wanted him back to work immediately. This studio-facilitated addiction rapidly spiraled out of control. Reid died from complications of his morphine addiction in 1923 at the age of 31. His story is a powerful indictment of the corporate failure to protect the star. The monster here is not just the actor's addiction, but the system that knowingly supplied the lethal means to keep him earning money, demonstrating a cruel, professional disregard for human life in pursuit of box office returns. John Barrymore. John Barrymore, hailed as the Great Profile, was one of the most respected and admired stage and screen actors of his generation. His massive talent, however, was overshadowed by his profound self-destruction, primarily through alcoholism and associated vices. Barrymore's alcoholism was legendary, leading to numerous professional incidents, failed marriages, and a catastrophic financial collapse that dragged those around him into chaos. Documentation exists about how celebrities lost massive fortunes due to mismanagement, bad investments, and substance use disorders. Barrymore's story exemplifies the habitual gambler and drinker whose vice systematically stripped him of his health, wealth, and reputation. His ability to charm and command attention gave way to recklessness and financial ruin, creating a vicious cycle of dependency and neglect that was devastating for his family. While self-inflicted, this behavior constitutes a monetary and emotional cruelty, prioritizing his addiction over the stability of his personal and professional life. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the board, was the cultural titan of the post-war era, embodying swagger, confidence, and coolness. The ultimate crooner was, however, deeply entangled with the American underworld, making his monster status one defined by calculated criminal affiliation. The FBI tracked Sinatra for over 40 years, amassing a massive dossier that details his extensive close friendships with major mafia figures, including the powerful Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana. Sinatra always denied direct involvement with organized crime, yet his willingness to associate with these destructive criminal entities provided them with access and a highly visible veneer of legitimacy. This alignment shows a profound betrayal of public trust. Furthermore, even before achieving massive fame, Sinatra's early life was tinged with lawlessness. In 1938, he was arrested for seduction and later for adultery, though charges were dropped, demonstrating an early pattern of using his charisma for sexual exploitation. His calculated decision to align with figures of organized crime, coupled with his historical personal offenses, confirms that his charisma was often a conduit for darker dealings. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney, the legendary child star with an 80-year career, lived a life of extreme highs and lows. His story is a powerful, cyclical, cautionary tale, a man whose personal volatility contributed to a destructive environment, eventually falling victim to the very exploitation he himself was alleged to have inflicted. Rooney married 8 times, and while he was famous for financial instability, his alleged cruelty was also domestic. He was reported to have been physically abusive toward his 8th wife, Jan Rooney. The chaos created by his many relationships and financial mismanagement eventually consumed him. Despite his fame, Rooney died with only $18,000 in assets, having been the victim of severe elder abuse, verbal, emotional, and financial, at the hands of his stepson, Chris Aber, who misappropriated millions of dollars over a decade. Rooney was eventually rescued by court intervention and bravely testified before a Senate panel in 2011 about his victimization. The narrative of Rooney underscores how unchecked volatility and personal cruelty can create a destructive vortex that eventually consumes the perpetrator, leaving him financially ruined and isolated at the end of his life. George Reeves. George Reeves, famous for portraying Superman, was a beloved figure whose unexpected death in 1959 was shrouded in immediate controversy and suspicion. While officially ruled a suicide, the circumstances surrounding his passing remain a central mystery of classic Hollywood's dark secrets. Reeves's tragedy shows the monstrous efficiency of the studio system in silencing inconvenient truths. The death occurred at a time when Reeves's career was struggling, and his private life involved complex relationships with powerful figures. The immediate acceptance of the suicide ruling, despite conflicting details, speaks to a powerful institutional desire to quickly contain the damage of a high-profile death. The studio's control over information and the subsequent lack of definitive closure allowed rumors and dark theories to flourish. Reeves' passing represents the many scandalous open secrets the industry buried to maintain the facade of glamour, where the actor's human story was collateral damage to the studio's need for control. Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper personified the ideal American man, tall, soft-spoken, and stoic. He was the moral compass in roles like High Noon and Sergeant York. His public image was one of absolute integrity and reliable strength. This image was, in reality, a profound lie. Cooper led a turbulent, secret double life, defined by chronic serial adultery and 5 or more hidden relationships throughout his marriage to Veronica "Rocky" Balfe. He was a master of deception, leveraging his reputation as the faithful, strong man to mask decades of infidelity and emotional betrayal. His chronic affairs inflicted continuous and profound emotional strain on his wife and daughter, Maria, impacting their stability for decades. His daughter later acknowledged that her father's late life turn to Catholicism was driven by an admitted emptiness, as he was looking for some more stability than he found personally. Cooper's monstrousness was calculated, prolonged emotional cruelty. He didn't commit a single violent outburst. Rather, he performed a slow, sustained betrayal that made his domestic life a continuous war zone, all while maintaining the veneer of the strong, silent American hero. This psychological disconnection between the idol and the man, perfected over decades by his celebrity and the system that protected him, makes him the ultimate example of the heartthrob monster. The stories of these 19 heartthrobs reveal a consistent pattern of institutional protection, shielding personal predation and volatility. The Hollywood studios of the Golden Age loved to act like guardians of morality, but in truth, they were masters of illusion. Behind the glamour and the glow, they built a system that protected their biggest stars no matter what they did, as long as the money kept flowing. The so-called morality clause in studio contracts weren't really about good behavior. It was about control. It allowed studios to silence scandals, protect reputations, and hide the truth from the public, all in the name of profit. Many actors found themselves trapped between doing what was right and saving their careers. The real fear wasn't moral failure, it was professional ruin. No one wanted to be the star who lost everything and ended up waiting tables. The Golden Age of Hollywood wasn't built on perfection, it was built on protection. Studios shielded their leading men from the consequences of their actions because those men brought millions to the box office. The morality clause was just a smokescreen, a clever way to keep the chaos contained behind closed doors. What the world saw were charming heroes and silver screen legends. But what existed in the shadows were stories of abuse, betrayal, and broken lives. These 19 hidden stories remind us that the glamour of old Hollywood often came at a heartbreaking human cost. History shows that fame amplified both the good and the bad in these stars. Their personal flaws became public disasters, but instead of holding them accountable, the studios used every resource they had to cover up the truth. They protected their money, not the victims. And because of that protection, many male stars began to believe they were untouchable. They behaved recklessly, even cruelly, knowing the studio would clean up their mess. They were too famous, too profitable to ever be allowed to fail in public. It's important to remember that nostalgia has a powerful way of softening history. We still love the classic films, the elegance, the unforgettable performances. But to truly appreciate the legacy of Hollywood, we also have to see its dark side, the secrets it buried, and the people it broke along the way. Now that the curtain of secrecy has finally fallen, we can see Hollywood's past for what it really was. A dazzling dream built on some devastating truths. So tell us, which of these shocking revelations changed how you see classic Hollywood forever? Did you ever suspect just how deep the deception went? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the hidden and untold history behind the lights, hit that subscribe button because this is just the beginning. The curtain is only just starting to fall.